Hey guys, it's Jeff again with Krav Maga Annapolis. Just wanted to make a second video about real quick lessons from various active shooter situations and how that impacts the question of why. Why do we have these seminars? Why do we feel so strongly about having them? And why do we put so much time and effort into making sure that we can get these trainings to the public? And today I wanted to talk about Tucson, Arizona, Jared Lee Loughner attempted assassination of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. This was in January of 2011, and basically what happened, sorry, Malcolm's here. Hey puppy. Yeah. Okay. He doesn't care so much about active shooter situations. Anyway, so you can go on Wikipedia and just look up Jared Lee Loughner or Tucson, Arizona shooting, and you can find kind of all the facts of the case. But there are three things that I wanted to point out in particular that are relevant to why Krav Maga Maryland feels so strongly about putting on these seminars. The first thing is the way that prior to the shooting, the Pima County Community College handled Jared Loughner. Apparently he was all over the map, psychologically speaking. He disturbed a lot of people. He made various threats. He said various anti-government things. He was kind of all over the place in terms of his expression of intent to violence and intent to, overthrow and conspiracy theories and all of this kind of stuff. And his behavior was disturbing enough that the Pima County Community College ended up suspending him pending psychiatric evaluation. That was not enough to stop him from committing a horrific atrocity where 6 people died and 13 people were injured. But they did what they could for their jurisdiction, for their area of responsibility. They took care of it, and they took action. And they didn't wait until they had proof that something was happening. And they didn't wait until they knew for a fact that he was a threat. They didn't hang back in indecision. They kicked this guy out of college and said, you can't come back until we know that you're safe, essentially. And was that enough? No. Did that prevent a horrific thing from happening? No. But it didn't happen at the community college. And so somebody somewhere put themselves on a limb and drew a line in the sand and just said, no, we're not comfortable with having this guy as a part of our community until we know what's going on with him. And I think that's actually the exception. What I've found with some of the companies that I've worked with, some of the schools, some of the other government organizations, some of the nonprofits that I've worked with, everybody is extremely hesitant to say, this is a person of concern. We don't like how they've been talking. We don't feel safe with this person here. And sure, could that go wrong? Could that go horrifically wrong? Yeah, absolutely. But it could also go wrong the other way, because while the media would have you say that all of these situations come out of nowhere and there's no warning signs and nobody could possibly have any idea that a person is planning an attack, the research says that simply isn't so. So somewhere, some college educators and administrators decided that it was worth them taking a stand and saying, no, this guy, we feel like this guy presents a threat and we're going to deal with him accordingly. So that's the first thing, is most of the folks that I talk to, most of the folks that train with us say that their workplace doesn't even have a process to file these types of concerns, that if they were concerned about a coworker, they don't even know where they would go. And they don't know what the response would be. And so training is still not getting out there in terms of how to report somebody ahead of time. Even if an organization does have a physical plan of reaction, there's no way to report concerns before the shooting or the attack actually happens. The second thing that I walked away with, sort of doing some research on this, is, actually in 2013, no, it was 2012. It was just the following year. I went to an executive protection class that's held here in Baltimore. It's Robert P. Oatman School of Executive Protection. And I did that just for my own continuing education. I did not plan on doing any sort of protection work or security work or bodyguard work or anything like that. But I wanted to better be able to teach self-defense to those professionals, and so that's what I did. I took the class so I could better understand their role. And as a part of that, we role played with all of the police reports and a multitude of detail. We role played the Jared Loughner shooting because it had just happened about a year prior. And the biggest thing that struck me was how easy it would have been to prevent. And our instructor said the same thing, is like anyone who is marginally switched on from a tactical standpoint or marginally aware of the possibility of some types of threats could have taken action. There was no police officers, there was no uniformed police, there was not a single squad car that was there at the grocery store parking lot where Congresswoman Giffords was having her sort of community roundtable. There was no distance between the line of people who wanted to talk to her and the Congresswoman herself. There was no plan for turning anyone away, and Loughner, absolutely, he cut in line and went all the way to the front and tried to talk to her first and was turned away by a staffer, an untrained staffer. And then he came back up and he tried to cut the line again and talk to her directly. And it was clear that they hadn't even thought about the fact that the situation could go sideways. And again, all the conversations, my expertise at this Oatman group at the class was self-defense and combatives and defensive tactics for law enforcement. There were a lot of other guys that had just gotten out of the military. There were a lot of other folks that were active duty military or sworn law enforcement of this, that, and the other. And all of us just kind of agreed that this would have been a super, super easy situation to stop if anyone had had any type of familiarity with how to construct this thing. Just some type of distance, some type of official security personnel, some type of plan in case somebody needed to be removed. And it's clear they had none of that. So the frustrating thing about the situation is I think it would have been really, really easy to prevent, and nobody even thought about the possibility of preventing it. And so lives were lost because of complacency. And it even occurred to me at the time that there was a level of hubris and arrogance of like, oh, that wouldn't happen here. Just outright denial. And the third lesson I think is really, really important to take from the Loughner shooting is how it was stopped. The first thing, stop it, puppy. Okay, sorry. The first thing that I could find about how the situation was actually ended was that a 74-year-old retired Army veteran who was wounded, who was shot and wounded, charged Loughner and stopped him initially, tried, kind of swatted the gun out of his hand or swatted the magazine out of his hand. When he went to reload, the guy took action. And he was already injured, and he was elderly. And then after the 74-year-old gentleman had taken some type of action, again, I think the reports are that he swatted away the magazine when Loughner tried to reload. Then some college athletes got in and they kind of crowded him, and the situation was stopped at that point. But you don't have to be big and strong. You don't have to be a professional fighter. You don't have to even be all that fit to take some type of action. And I'm convinced that this gentleman, because of his military service and probably some of the things that he had seen throughout the course of his military service, he was ready to take action, and he had the right mindset. And so even though he was wounded and he was much, much older, that he played a critical part. And maybe if he hadn't done that, 12 people would be dead instead of 6 or 18 or 20, who knows? And we don't know. But he took action, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. And, I get really defensive, obviously, when people say, oh, there's no use in working the physical skills. There's no use in training, unless you're armed, there's no chance, of stopping a shooter. And that usually comes with a particular political agenda that I'm not going to touch on. But I'm saying, hey, when it comes to these types of situations, you can't say X doesn't work. X has worked, and X has worked in the worst possible situation, X being going hands-on with an attacker while lives are in the midst of being lost. So anyway, a couple lessons from Tucson, Arizona, some things that I took away, and some things that heavily inform my training. Because again, when I'm running an active shooter seminar, these things just kind of bubble to the surface as we're facing just such an ugly and horrific social phenomenon that's been happening over and over and over again. I think particularly those of us who are trainers are obligated to do the research and to get as many lessons as possible from the lives of others and from the horrific happenings that have already occurred. So again, active shooter seminar, Krav Maga Annapolis, February 9th. Please register, and we look forward to seeing you there.